I don't know. We on?
I don't think so. Oh, wait.
I think we'll. Yeah. Are we live?
Maybe.
Are we?
I'm checking.
There's a delay, so we gotta see.
Right.
Hello out there.
We're on.
Hello and welcome to episode 43 of Life in General. My name is Nick.
I'm Ian.
Oh, the audios. Is that your audio?
Yeah, it is. It is my audio.
Good job, Ian. Good job.
Hey, I want everyone to hear what my phone is saying.
Is that what it is?
It's saying exactly what we're saying, but okay.
As always, any questions or comments, you can email us at contact@lifeinjournalpodcast.com. We are at LIGpod on Twitter. Of course, you can check us out on Facebook if you're watching the show live on there.
Mm-hmm. Mandy's watching.
Do we have people watching the show?
Mandy's watching.
Well,
Hi, Mandy.
Well, I gotta bring my feet up. I got too many things going on in front of me.
Yeah.
So what's going on, Ian?
Rock and roll is dead.
Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about.
Indeed.
Before we get into it, I did want to say, so I just had my last week of class for the psychology class I'm doing. And I do have to say, now granted, I'm in a class with a bunch of young kids. So the question was this week they were talking about what if you live to 80.
Okay.
What do you want your life's accomplishment to be, or what kind of goals?
Well, for me, living to 80 would be a huge accomplishment. But yeah.
Is the video moving? Or are we having video issues?
Not that I can tell.
Okay, because my computer froze up. But it was really kind of interesting because, of course, all these little kids are talking about how these cars they want and these houses that they want, and I'm like, I just want to help people. Is that a hard thing? I mean, but it was just really comical because all these little kids are talking about all the possessions that they want. That's just all.
Right. I mean, there's experiences I would like. I mean, I don't know if that's materialistic or not, but
no. But it was like a lot of the stuff that they're talking about.
It's not like when I I'm on my deathbed and I look around, I've got, the newest and greatest TV and stereo system, and I got 5 cars in my garage. I'm not going to go, that was a life well lived.
Well, that's kind of the path that we're going down with the question. So
yeah, fucking kids.
Yeah, it's whatever. Completely off subject, I guess.
Subject, yeah.
I took an early path on a different road, I guess. So as far as like rock music,
real quick, we just throw it out there. I think Mandy might be the only one watching right now, just in case. No, you're watching too.
I'm watching too.
If the video's choppy, let us know because it seems like it might be choppy.
Or if the audio, if you can't hear us, let us know.
Yeah, definitely. So, but anyway, you started to say something about rock music.
Well, we grew up in the same kind of era.
Yeah. Through
the 80s and 90s, and it always seemed like there was all these like iconic bands. Whether it be, Led Zeppelin in the 70s and through the 80s with
Guns N' Roses
and Metallica, and through the 90s with, there's a bunch of...
the 90s was really kind of had a lot going for it.
Yeah, but
especially the early 90s.
Well, even through the mid to late 90s, a lot of them.
Yeah, but,
You can look back and you can look at all these iconic albums of really from the... say
late 60s
or even early 60s. Yeah. Well, mid 60s through early 2000s, but really since then there really hasn't been
nothing iconic, nothing of any real depth or quality either, if you ask me. But
don't mind me, I'm just reading comments.
Yeah, I know. It just, Mandy, it is delayed a little bit, so when you hear us say something, it's like 10 seconds behind. So
but the audio goes with the video, doesn't it?
Yeah, as far as I can tell, but I'm looking at it on a very small screen.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
I'm not listening to the video because you told me to turn it down.
Yeah, obviously, because
it's like I'll leave it up to the audience to tell us what's going on if there's any problems.
Yeah,
the audience is your wife.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of people watching.
Is there?
Yeah.
I can't tell.
If you look at music today, you still have big bands selling out,
but they're from
big
those
arenas.
eras.
Yeah, they're from the really from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, really.
Right.
And it's almost like a celebration of the past. It's not anything that's going on in the present.
I apply that to the fact that there's nothing for anybody now. If there was See, think about this. When you look back at the hi Aaron, if you look back at the say the late 80s, early 90s,
Yeah.
bands from the 60s and 70s weren't selling out arenas like they are now.
I mean, some of them were from the 70s.
Not many. You didn't hear people saying, "Oh, I'm going to go see X band X from
Journey."
Well, I mean, Journey was probably still around, but what I'm saying is,
Well, I'm saying today. Those are the kind of bands that are still selling out.
When we were in our teens, people were only really going and seeing the new bands.
Yeah.
There aren't any new bands to go see, so it's kind of opened up this need for these older bands to be able to sell out big shows.
But
they couldn't have done that 10 years ago.
Even the older bands aren't really doing anything new.
No, because it's just greatest hits.
Yeah,
but,
that's basically all they're.
But that's
playing.
okay because at least it's good quality music. It's kind of I look at it like if there's nothing new to offer people, it makes it easier to go back and say, well, Journey's coming to town with Def Leppard. Let's go see them.
Yeah.
And they sold out fucking Little Caesar Arena 2 weeks ago.
Is that where they played
Yeah.
at?
Little Caesar Arena.
Okay.
And they sold it out.
But
Def Leppard and Journey sold it out.
yeah, it's 1987 or 88 again.
Right, exactly.
I do want to say real quick that I think today is the 25th anniversary of the release of Siamese Dream.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, next year's the 25th anniversary of Dookie. This year is the 25th anniversary of August and Everything After.
Yeah.
So I mean, those are all iconic albums.
They're also from the 90s.
Yeah. Well, that's the point.
I know. But I mean, it's like even if you look at, I mean, there have been some big albums released in the 2000s.
Not in rock though.
There have been.
In the 2000s, can you name one? Name a couple? So I have some.
American Idiot.
But they're by bands that existed already.
But
I'm talking about new bands.
I mean, I'm talking anything.
Okay.
Anything from any band. Really, if you go back, there really has been any big albums released in the past 10 years.
Right. Well, American Idiot is definitely up there, but I left
and that's what I'm saying. Like, and that's why I
leave
said
it out
really
because it's not. It's a band that existed before.
But it just, and that's what I'm talking. I'm talking about any of it.
Yeah.
No one's really released anything big.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that could have a lot to do with the music industry. But
that's what I'm saying, though,
is
it's not necessarily that rock is dead. I think it has more to do with other genres have just eclipsed.
Yeah, but
rock.
I mean, I'm just looking at what new rock is being offered, and it's not good.
I mean,
it's the Nickelback syndrome.
Possibly.
If that's what rock and roll is, then it's dead. Because it's not what rock and roll is.
I wouldn't say it's dead. I think the big issue with rock music today, in my opinion, is it just lacks a soul. There's really nothing to it.
Right, that's my point.
If you have a band, if you have a band, say like the Sex Pistols, the Clash, Nirvana, somebody like that come out now, and that's able to speak in some kind of authentic way to people, whether it be social issues, political statements, any kind of public concern like that.
Disenfranchisement, yeah.
That's when you'll see, I think, a return of rock. But I mean, no one's doing anything.
No,
like that right
I
now.
know, and that's what American Idiot was. I mean, that was as much of a protest album as any could be for the time period.
Man, do you really think it's because no one buys CDs anymore? I mean,
well, that would apply. That could apply to not getting these iconic albums that you're talking about. To a point.
Yeah.
Because people aren't buying, Green Day aside, all these bands,
there have been some other
bands
ones
that have put out new albums, and no one's buying them.
But I mean, it's
good or otherwise.
If you want to talk about truly iconic albums, I mean, really the last one I can think of is the Black Parade from My Chemical Romance. Right. I mean, which was it was a gigantic album, but that was 2006.
Mandy, I know you love Nickelback, but that is grounds for divorce. So, yeah, and I'll have to support Nick on that.
Yeah, no Nickelback. That's bad. But I think they're kind of, I don't know. They're kind of a symptom of the problem, I think, though.
What's that? Nickelback? Yeah.
I mean, they're just trying to make music, but it's just, I think we went through this whole grunge era through the 90s. And really, I guess late 90s is kind of when it stopped, when it ended.
But then it just became hard, like kind of semi-metal.
But I think they kind of took this grunge element, with this disenfranchisement, I guess, or whatever, this angst that you want, that really made the music. And I think they wanted to try to make, or record companies wanted to make it more profitable. So they thought they would kind of take the lyrics and kind of mesh it with more of a pop music rock sound. And I think that's where you get bands like Nickelback from.
Maybe. It's because you say that, like, take Three Doors Down. I don't like them anymore either. Their first album was good. It had a lot of potential, some good songs on it.
Yeah.
And they had that one hit with that sappy song, and then their next album come out, and it's all that.
Yeah.
It's all that sappy song.
Who else was like that? There was it the Goo Goo Dolls that did that too? Like, their first album was, like, really hard. Yeah. And then they had a couple of, like, poppy hits, and then the rest of their albums were like...
Well, Sugar Ray was like that. Kind of. They had that...
Yeah?
They had that album that was really popular, but if you go back and listen to their earlier stuff, it was way more rock-oriented.
It was. And their later albums were also. They still mixed it up, but their hits were their poppy music.
Yeah. And I don't generally hold a band up to their popular music, because it's what you hear on the radio, or... I mean, do you even hear it on the radio? I don't know. But back in the day, and even in the 90s, you hear a song on the radio, that would not be indicative of the whole album. 9 times out of 10, the hit is fine. It kind of it appeals to the general public. But when you dig deeper, sorry, hitting my mic. When you dig deeper into their albums, it's all the other songs that were really good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know if you really... I don't even know if you have that anymore. I mean, maybe that's part of the issue. And yes, Mandy, I understand that. I mean, there is other good music out there. Just we're talking about, like, just iconic albums.
Yeah. Well, and rock music,
because
you got to leave.
There are rock bands out there that are making good music. I mean,
which ones are they though? Because I've tried finding them and I'm not finding them.
And they might not be new bands.
And I argue that My Chemical Romance might not even be rock.
Well, sure it is. It is. Even
I tried listening to them, and I'm just not getting anything from it. It wasn't talking to me.
It talked to a lot of people out there, though. I mean, it was a huge album.
It doesn't make it good,
But it was a huge
Donald Trump
album.
talks to a lot of people too.
But what I'm saying though is it was a huge album in 2006. But even like Linkin Park's "One More Light," which came out in 2017, that was a really good album.
I don't know of any Linkin Park's music beyond their like early stuff, but
yeah.
But see that was for what I never was a huge Linkin Park fan, but for what it's worth, at least it was something kind of different. It was incorporating a bit of hip hop in there. Mm-hmm. It was trying to stay fresh. For what it's worth, that we just don't get that anymore. We need something new. I only really listen to rock music. I listen to rock. I listen to old blues, a little bit of old jazz, and classical. Those are the genres I like.
Yeah.
A little bit of folk too, but mostly those other ones. So, from my perspective, and I'm not looking at the music industry as a whole. I leave that to people who like pop music and R&B and hip hop. That's for them to talk about.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm just talking about rock and roll. I'm just talking about rock music in general, and it doesn't have. I have not been able to find any new bands that have passion for what they're doing the way I sensed the old bands, because maybe they didn't either, but they were able to
it came through in their music.
It came through. Whether they believed it or not, it was coming through.
Yeah.
It just doesn't exist anymore, and we need something new, like you said, maybe something a little bit more, not so much edgy, because you can find all sorts of heavy metal rock and hard rock that says all kinds of inappropriate things, and you could classify it as edgy, but there just hasn't been anything real powerful lately. And I mean, even excluding American Idiot, because that would be the exception. We take that out of the equation, we're looking at 15 years.
There have been
some better without anything.
There have been. They just haven't been.
My question is, I keep asking, you keep saying that. What are they? Because I can't find them. Tell me, give me examples.
What, they're big albums?
Yeah, and they're rock. I'm talking about rock because there have been some really powerful hip hop albums.
Elephant was a big album, and
that was 2003. That was 15 years ago.
I know. Oh, that's my point. That's what I'm trying to get to. And by the way, 2003 was a big year for. There was a lot of really big albums that came out that year. But really, after that, I mean, You had American Idiot in 04. Sex, Love, and Rock and Roll from Social Distortion was 04.
See, and I haven't even heard that album yet.
That's a really good album. I said Black Parade in 06. Yeah. When Your Heart Stops Beating from Plus 44 came out in 06.
Who the hell is Plus 44?
It was two of the members of Blink-182.
Okay.
That was a really good album. Let the Dominoes Fall from Rancid came out in 09. And I already said Linkin Park, but that's about it.
But again, we're most of those bands have been around, so they're excluded from the conversation by the fact that they released iconic albums before the 2000s. They were part of the glory days just because they're doing good stuff.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I'm looking for new bands. I'm saying where are these new rock bands that are going to come out and revolutionize?
That's kind of what I'm talking about. And Mandy, they are rock, those are rock bands. I mean, they might be punk is an offshoot of rock. It's still part of rock though. Just like grunge was part of rock.
Mandy, you really need to get off that whole. Jethro Tull is my favorite band, but I have literally 200 bands in my playlist. Bands, not just songs, bands in my playlist. And maybe 3 of them have flutes in it.
Ian's getting defensive.
A little bit, because it has nothing to do with that. And we're talking about rock and roll. Where I pointed out, I'm not talking about the quality of pop. I'm not talking about the quality of hip hop or rap. I'm talking about rock and roll music.
Just touching on rap and all that, it's just that's kind of where music is right now. I mean, if you run down a list, I think this is I had a list from Rolling Stone up a while before we started recording, and it was the top 100 albums of the 2000s. It was all rock. I'm sorry, it was all rap, hip hop, R&B, country. There was just very little rock in it, but there was a lot of there's a lot of really big rap albums that came out in the last 15 years. It's just,
right now, you can find
that's where
those
music is right now.
Kind of iconic rap albums, specifically that have social issues.
Yeah.
Childish Gambino and stuff like that. I mean, that's stuff that's kind of hitting those nerves that are good. But again, we're talking about rock and roll now. We're not talking about those.
I know that. But that's what I'm saying, though, is rock dead, or has it just shifted? The focus of music, has it shifted to those other genres?
We're still getting bands who are trying to be rock, who are playing rock type music. When I say rock is dead, I'm saying what rock is dead. It doesn't mean we can't have something new come along, but I'm not seeing any evidence of that.
But how much of that is just nostalgia? I mean,
you could argue that Jack White. I think the White Stripes and his solo stuff is really good and new, but it is just his passion for the old stuff.
Yeah.
So you could argue that.
I guess you could say that for a lot of music, though.
True. Well, go back to the 60s and 70s. Those bands, yes, they were doing it differently, but it was all a passion for the blues artists that came before them. So, Led Zeppelin, Sabbath, Tull. Those were their early stuff is just, their version, their take on what America had for black people blues,
and
jazz, and then these were just these
because a lot of
lower middle class white people reworkings of that.
Yeah, because a lot of early '60s rock was from you could look back on Coltrane and things like that that influenced all that.
Yeah, Elvis, as much as I dislike Elvis, all that was he basically all his sound was just white man reworking of blues, black blues. Yeah. So, but I don't know. So there's nothing wrong with that if these bands are doing it, but I guess at the end of the day, it's really more kind of like you said. The record companies are probably pushing a more commercially viable agenda.
Maybe.
And unfortunately, commercially viable songs are love songs. So most of these rock bands are going to do fucking love songs. That's not rock. You can have a love song on an album.
Yeah.
But don't make your whole fucking album about it.
And older bands are guilty of that too. Look at Aerosmith.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they had a big album. I don't remember what song it was. It was from that freaking space movie.
Yeah. Well, it's not a space movie. It's more of it's an asteroid movie. Armageddon.
But they go in, Armageddon. Yeah. They had the one big hit from Armageddon, and now their music is vastly different since then.
But if they would have just stuck with what was working for them before that, Pump and Permanent Vacation, they could have continued on doing that, but they didn't.
Yeah.
But if you look at the hair bands, and I think I even brought this up when we were talking about Hysteria on the last Entertainment Now plug.
Go listen.
Go listen. Yeah, the every band, all those old '80s hair bands, they really had these really powerful rock ballads, like hair metal ballads.
Yeah.
That even if you didn't like those kind of songs, you usually liked those songs. But there would be one on every album, one or two on every album, and the rest were just rock songs. Alice Cooper did it. He even pointed out, you got to have one.
Yeah.
One on every album. Fine. The whole album being that would suck.
Yes.
And that's kind of what we've gotten into. The rock bands, that's it. And I think that maybe that's what it is. They're trying to compete in a world where your casual listeners, of which your wife would be a casual radio type listener, only want to hear love songs or poppy kind of songs. When they really should be focusing on the people who are buying fucking vinyl records and CDs and all that other
I think
stuff.
there's more a shift to that. But, Mandy, you do know what rock is. I mean, Panic at the Disco is rock, and they've done some good music, and that's a newer band.
I listen to them, too. I try after, because your wife, she said it was a good show, but I put them on Spotify, and I'm like, I don't think this is rock.
It is. It is.
I don't know. Maybe it is.
It's not like
I only listen to a couple songs.
It's not like hardcore like Metallica 80s rock.
It doesn't have to be.
I know that. What I'm saying though is it's still rock. I mean,
but I don't know. Maybe because it has too much of a pop flair to it. Maybe that's why it wasn't working for me. But I didn't have any necessarily problem with the quality of it. It wasn't screaming rock and roll to me.
I guess
it just wasn't.
Yeah.
So.
But I mean, there's like I said, there's a lot of things out there that I think you can look back. Rock and roll is a big umbrella,
right?
And it encompasses a lot of different sounds. But
yeah, but it's certain basics.
I just don't like the pop driven music that it really has been the last 10+ years.
Well, and that's again, maybe I just picked the wrong songs when I listened to these bands, but that's kind of what I heard from them. It was just kind of poppy beats, and I don't know. I don't know.
And
maybe I have to go through and listen to more of their catalog. But Panic at the Disco and My Chemical Romance were the two that I looked at, and I just didn't get it. I didn't get it.
Now, the other thing is, maybe part of the reasons why we don't have these like iconic albums anymore is because of the way music is streamed now. There's not really an emphasis put on creating an album anymore.
Well, that's true.
And
that goes to what Mandy said about CDs. No one's buying CDs anymore.
So yeah, maybe there's some truth to that. But because really, if you're an artist now, instead you're not going to spend 12 to 18 months sitting down and writing an album and going through all that when you can crank out a couple of songs over a month or two and just release them as singles.
Yeah, maybe.
Because if you go on I don't know how it is on Spotify, but I know on Apple Music there's a lot of music on there that there is no album. It's just a single, and there's a lot of those.
Well, Andy, yeah, I can see that the Metallica, Ozzy, and Alice thing. That's a lot of what I would classify as like your standard rock of our generation, like kind of hard or old core, old school
80s
rock.
and 90s rock. That's what it was.
But it rock music in general would encompass like even Green Day, MXPX, Less Than Jake, bands that you've heard us listen to that aren't in that area.
Yeah.
And then going to like Zeppelin or your dad, Mandy's dad, like Chicago a lot. Chicago's rock. I mean, it's a little bit more on the poppy side of rock, but for the time period that Chicago was popular, that was okay because there was that singer-songwriter era in the late 70s that kind of, it worked well. It blended well. Boston, Journey, they call them the arena bands in the late 70s, Kansas. So, I mean, there's a lot of popular bands that fall into the rock category.
Yeah.
Even if you get into the 80s, Duran Duran, Men at Work, they were the 80s versions of those bands. Aha, another pop rock band, but
very much so.
But still rock in the same sense. So, and for the record, Ozzy and Alice and Metallica put out a lot more than just one hit record. But
yeah, they're. But I mean, if you just scroll, I got a list on my computer, and I just Googled rock albums, 90s rock albums, and you just scroll through the top. And look at the iconic albums. Nevermind, OK Computer by Radiohead, Siamese Dream, which I mentioned earlier, Blood Sugar Sex Magic from Red Hot Chili Peppers, In Utero by Nirvana, 10 by Pearl Jam, Melancholy and Infinite Sadness, Super Unknown, Automatic for the People, Dookie, The Bends. I mean, these are just big iconic albums.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you just don't have that.
Right.
I mean, and it's really been a
long time,
a 10+ year void of
and those like and a lot of those, basically those are bands or albums that you mentioned that came out when we were in our teens. I mean, those are just our teens and maybe late teens even. Weezer and
I could have went on. I mean, just on and on and on.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing. You look back, and I mean, every generation is going to be that. Well, they don't make music like they used to. I mean, there's a part of that to it too. But when I think about what bands that I like and that I've listened to and continue to listen to, even there's kind of a multi-generational element to them.
Yeah.
So it's nostalgia, but it's not necessarily nostalgia because it plays on a lot of different levels that appeal to a large generation of people.
Yeah.
Whereas something like, if we go outside of rock, something like NSYNC or Backstreet Boys.
Yeah. Which is pop.
They appeal to a large group, but will they have the generational playback that rock has? And they might. I don't know. Backstreet Boys are back on tour.
Yeah.
So who knows? They could be that next wave of that. But when we talk about rock, you can be nostalgic about it, but you can also look at it again on a much larger basis, because it can appeal. You can have a 60-year-old guy listening to Green Day and a 10-year-old listening to Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
Whereas you may not see that so much in some of the other things. Rap will have that. We have, there's kids growing up who are listening to NWA now, and the people who grew up when NWA was new or can be listening to the new stuff. There's a multi-generational element to it. That's just not the problem with that, and that's where I think rock is dying. Is the stuff that's coming out now is almost too set in its time period, too focused on the generation now. Or My Chemical Romance, I don't get it. I don't get it because it's not. I don't think it's being made for me.
But that's what I'm saying though. Is I think
to grow up to now
for a 40 or 50 year span, I think a lot of rock music was made for the sake of. I mean, for the passion for the genre, really. You made a rock album because you loved playing rock music, and I think a lot of it today, at least from what it seems like to me, is bands are making rock music so they can sell albums. You understand what I'm saying? They're trying to create popular music instead of playing something that's just their passion.
Right. Your wife says we need to address the audience. Hi, audience, again. Your mom said Led Zeppelin is rock. Rock to her is Led Zeppelin, and your dad pointed out Doobie Brothers. But see that's kind of to our point, where those two bands are very different, in their sound, yet they're still rock.
Yeah,
both of them are still rock. Zeppelin was very much, very lower middle class white British musicians doing their version of very low middle class black blues from the United States.
Yeah.
Whereas Doobie Brothers are very much kind of entwined in that Southern era because they're an American band, so it's more their cultural side. But doing more of the countryside of rock, for whatever that's worth.
And I just want to say real quick, it'd be a lot easier to address the audience if Ian didn't go off on these like 5-minute rants, because I get yelled at for interrupting you, so I try not to interrupt you. But yeah, I've been reading the comments.
Yeah,
it's kind of hard for me to like read notes, like, you know, adjust volume and things like that, and edit the show on the fly, and like do all the Facebook stuff too. So I try to leave something to Ian. He just,
ladies and gentlemen, this is Nick being passive aggressive and telling me I don't do enough. So.
But I kind of do that in every episode, don't I?
You do, but now everyone's watching, so.
Oh, okay.
But hopefully we're addressing the audience enough.
But those bands were hard rock back then.
Yeah.
But
yeah, there wasn't. I mean, the hardest.
But where's that next wave?
That's my problem. That's what I want.
Because I remember pretty much for 40 years you could say, all right, well, right now there's probably a kid somewhere playing his guitar in his parents' garage is going to revolutionize music. And right. I don't know if we have that.
We don't. Unfortunately, at least not that I can tell.
Now, granted, we only know that when they come out, but
true. But see, think about this: you had in the late '60s, say '67 to '70, you had this huge surge of new music, new bands, and all of them doing their own thing. Zeppelin came out in that period. Tull, yes. Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Cat Stevens. I mean, these are Elton John, Alice Cooper, Black Sabbath. From 67 to 70, that's when all these bands came out, and they were all doing their own thing, and that really was like that revolutionized rock music, because it was completely different from what the Beatles were doing and the Moody Blues were doing, and the Zombies and the Animals and all the precursors to that. And that lasted for a while, and then the late mid-70s came, and you had the more arena rock. You had the Kansas, the Journey, the Boston, Styx, REO Speedwagon. These bands that are like, they were kind of the equivalent of the commercial side of rock, but they were still doing Rush, another one that came out in the late 70s. But that was a whole new era of rock. And then the 80s, you had the surge of, say, the Men at Work, the Aha, the Duran Durans, the Flock of Seagulls, for what it's worth. You know, these were bands that were still doing rock music, but they were doing their version of rock. And then you had the hair bands of the mid-'80s and on till the early 2000s. Guns N' Roses, Metallica, even though they were more early 80s, but Metallica, Poison, Rat, you know, the list goes on. Then you hit the 90s, that's when the grunge era hit. And then they're doing their own kind of rock, and it's still rock, but it's their own kind.
It's a very long evolution.
Yeah, and it may not be evolving beyond too far, but it's still an evolution of a sort. Once that grunge era kind of stopped, and you still had these bands coming out that were, whether they were imitating grunge or still kind of trying to feel out that grunge thing, it just stopped. Nothing has come out. There hasn't been another group of artists to come out. I'm not talking about albums. I'm talking about actual artists come out that are either taking what was old and making it their own, but doing something slightly different, and really talking to their audience in that way. It just that's what I'm looking for. That's why I think rock is dead, because we hit that. There was this consistent, every 5 to 6 years or so, you'd have this new wave of groups come out. And Nick's looking at me because I'm ranting and talking again. I'm sorry.
I'm just going to fold my arms and just sit back in the chair and just listen.
If I'm saying something inappropriate, tell me. But we had all these surges of groups, and we don't have that anymore. That's where it stops. Hi.
I just want to get to some comments. I mean, but real quick, I just want to say I can't blame millennials for everything. It's one of the comments.
No, because quite honestly,
millennials are.
Baby boomers gave us some of the greatest music, but they also gave us all the political problems we've got. So
a lot of them,
most of them.
And I wouldn't say true rock is for old people, even though I was in my car with my kids not too long ago. It might have been a year or so back, and Jack, my oldest, he was like scrolling through my music, and he's like, "You got a lot of old music from the '90s on here."
Yeah.
I'm like, that's when music was good.
Well, we had that conversation at work, and you mentioned Green Day and the I don't want to say anyone's name. She was like, "But that's old music."
Yeah.
I'm like, what the hell? It's not old. It's not old. Just because it's older than 10 years doesn't make it old.
And I wouldn't say hippie era was rock. I mean,
well, it was early rock. That was, the Mamas and the Papas, Jefferson Airplane.
It was folk rock.
And it was mostly folky. It was a little bit more folky.
So I guess,
stuff.
it was...
Dylan would have been considered the hippie era.
Yeah.
The Grateful Dead. It was still rock. What evolved from that, I believe, is better, and that would be the Zeppelins and the so on and so on.
And I think I am, Mandy, I think I'm familiar with music now. I mean, I listen to a lot of... I try to expand my musical horizons. Just there's not a whole lot out there.
And again, we're speaking strictly about rock and roll right now. We're not talking about all music in general. We're talking just about rock music.
And I do listen to the radio. Well,
I don't.
I listen to internet radio. I don't listen to on the radio in my car.
When you listen to internet radio, you're still limiting yourself because you're listening to stuff that's being formulated based on your previous choices.
Yeah, I guess it's true. But I guess when you listen to the radio, all you're hearing is the stuff that the quote unquote popular music
right.
that they want you to listen to.
Well, even the classic rock,
like you brought up Sugar Ray, prime example. If you buy their first album, I think it was their first album, and you think you're going to get an album of what their radio hits are, and you go listen to the album, it's a very different album.
Right.
The only music that's like that is like the couple of poppy radio friendly songs. The rest of the album is very different.
Well, and then the album that those hits came from is a bit more tied to that, but they kind of joke about that too. I mean,
they do.
The name of that album was
1459.
Yeah, because their 15 minutes of fame was just about up.
Yeah,
which it was, ironically. But it's I don't listen to radio. I do not listen to the radio because when we would listen to the radio at work, it would always be the top hit stuff. But you'd find, if you're listening to it for 8 or 10 hours or 12 hours at a time, every hour you're hearing a lot of the same songs over and over again. And it gets to a point. I'm not speaking now specifically because I haven't had to listen to the radio even at work for years now. But no matter what station you were listening to, it was becoming too muddled, and it was always the same songs. If you put on the radio, you'll hear the same Eagles song. You'll hear the same Britney Spears song. You'll hear the same whatever, Alanis, whatever it is. Because most of the stations aren't tied to one genre anymore anyway.
No.
They're all just top 40 radio stations because that's what sells. So you're going to hear Counting Crows on the same radio station that you're going to hear NSYNC. Yeah. That's just the way it is, which is fine, but it's the same fucking songs over and over and over again. And there's a reason for that. The radio stations, they license these songs. These songs are licensed to the radio stations. And it costs too much money to license more than a few songs from each individual artist. Yeah. So you're only going to hear Mr. Jones from Counting Crows, and you're only going to hear Ironic by Alanis Morissette. You're only going to hear these top 40 songs. And that's why I don't listen to the radio.
And as far as correct. And maybe I may ask a question about what radio stations I listen to. I don't, but what I listen to is, if you go into Apple Music, they've got playlists that what Apple will do is they'll take like the top 40 rock songs, and they update them every week what the most popular music is. And you go through there, and I've got the rock playlist, I've got the pop playlist, so I listen to, and I just hit shuffle, and I'll just listen to the music. So I'm always listening to new music because I'm always looking for something new out there.
Right.
Because I get tired of listening to the same 30 bands,
Yeah.
So, and I don't know. So I do listen to, like I said, I don't listen to the radio, but I do listen to hit music, to music.
Right.
I mean, it just...
And for me, I don't mind it. I don't have a problem with it. It's just that like I said earlier, a lot of times what's played on the radio is not indicative of what the album itself is or what the band itself is. And that's a lot of bands. That's most bands out there. It's not just the bands that I like. It's a lot of them. I would even say the Britney Spears and the NSYNCs and the Backstreet Boys. What gets played on the radio may not even be the best songs on the albums. I could be wrong on that. Maybe they are, but I would assume that there's options for there not being. You know, so.
And I was trying to read some comments.
I know, Mandy. You keep writing these long diatribes. I can't keep.
It's kind of hard to read while we're trying to talk.
Well, radio stations aren't playing new stuff either. They're playing. They're playing top 40 stuff, and they'll bleed in some new stuff. But it's a lot of times. When I do turn on the radio,
they do play new stuff. But
you're hearing stuff that's 20 years old.
Not the radio stations I listen to, but it just
I'm not going to listen to radio stations that play Britney Spears
but
I'm just not.
Like rock stations, I hear a lot of new music whenever I do put them on. But
how many rock stations are there in the Detroit area? 2?
Probably. I mean,
okay, there's 2. 89X. Mm-hmm. I know they at least at one point they were playing new rock, but it was then when it was Nickelback and Creed and.
Because that's what was popular.
That was new, but it was also popular. And radio stations are are not playing what's good; they're playing what sells. And it could be the same thing; they're not mutually exclusive. But it could be garbage. But if it sells, the radio stations will play it. Yeah. If it's really, really good, like it could be the best thing ever made, and it's not popular, the radio stations will not play it. So. But we're limited on the sense that we don't have MTV anymore playing music videos for new bands.
I think that probably plays a part in it.
So we don't have the access to see things. Oh, well, that's interesting and new. And the radio stations, really pay attention to these radio stations. The majority of the radio stations in the Detroit area are top 40 radio stations. So they're going to play top 40 from 1970s up to 2018. It's all just going to be top 40 stuff.
Let me throw this out there, though. So, and I wonder how much this has to play in it also. You mentioned MTV not playing music videos or anything anymore. What about, I wonder how much of the lack of big albums or iconic albums, if you want to call it that, is marketing. Because you don't have MTV pushing music videos anymore, so the record companies aren't, and obviously record companies and musicians aren't making a lot of money off album sales anyway. Right. So how much have they withdrawn from the media push that you used to have on albums?
Right. Well, yeah, because
there'd be big marketing campaigns behind an album's release, and
and music videos were to advertise albums. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mandy? What station would you refer to? Give me an example of a station that is playing new stuff that is, legitimately new, like new bands. We're talking about rock. That would play new bands, with the exception, they might be playing the My Chemical Romance and the Panic at the Disco. And I do question that's rock, but that's not.
It is rock.
It is. It is
rock.
For what it is. I've only listened to a few songs, so I'll leave the comment to that. But I guess what radio stations should someone who was looking for new rock music, because you're saying that if you're not listening to the rock radios, you're only listening to talk radio and podcast, which I do. Hey, you're right.
If you're going to listen to podcasts, though,
you should listen to Life in General.
Listen to Life in General.
Yes, but as a suggestion, what would you say? 98X. Okay, I remember when 98X used to be rock. Is it still rock?
It is.
Okay. Are they playing new bands, rock bands?
Whenever I listen to the radio, that's pretty much what I listen to.
89X was the one that I was always listening to. 104.7's classic rock, though, I think, isn't it? It used to be.
I believe so, unless it's changed.
Unless it's changed. Not familiar. 92.7 used to be a rap station. Or it was either a rap or a country station. So I wouldn't listen to that anyway. It's not my kind of music.
Unless they change formats.
94.7 is strictly classic rock. And that's another perfect example. When it's classic rock, they're playing all they advertise as playing, we play all the Beatles hits and they play all the Beatles hits. There's probably a lot more Beatles. But really at the end of the day, they play a lot of Beatles. They play Hotel California, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road and Rocket Man by Elton John. They'll play Carry On Wayward Son by Kansas. Occasionally you'll hear some Zeppelin in there, but it's always the same fucking songs.
But
Elton John has made 45 albums since he made Yellow Brick Road. There's no reason they can't play some Elton John from the 2000s. There's no reason they can't play some Alice Cooper from 1997 or 98 whenever they only play School's Out or $1 Billion Babies. They only play the hits. That's kind of what I'm talking about.
But but kind of getting back to what I was saying earlier is, yes, there is good music out there today. There are good songs. I'm talking about an album, an entire album of good music.
See, I can't comment because I don't know these. I'm not even familiar. I'm always looking at. Spotify has new music every week. They have a new music icon. They put it up. I look at that all the time. Granted, it's going to be rock because that's what I tend to listen to. So it's the new stuff based on what I listen to. None of it's good.
But as far as like newer bands, I mean, I don't know how new Fall Out Boy is, but they've made some really good music. Imagine Dragons has made some really good music.
Last week I googled new. I just typed in new rock bands. And it came up with, it said 50 of the best new rock bands, and I hadn't heard of any of them, and I haven't gotten back to the list to go and listen to them, and granted, because I haven't heard of them doesn't necessarily mean that they're not out there, but I can tell you I never heard of these bands. They're names that have never come up in conversation with anybody.
Like,
I don't even remember. I mean, there were I was going to go back through the list, but my phone's getting ready to die, so.
Oh.
I'm at 14% battery.
Good job, Chucklehead.
Plus, I don't want to stop watching the. Yeah, see,
The feed.
104.3 is now oldies, and you know, for what it's worth, I like to have more control over what I'm listening to, and I'm fine with getting exposed to new stuff. I want new stuff. I'm constantly looking for new stuff, but you know. Yes, it's new rock stuff. That's what I like. It's what I like.
Yeah.
I'm not going to apologize for it. It doesn't make me limited. I have thousands and thousands and thousands of songs to choose from because of what I like. I'm not that limited. Just because I don't like hip hop and rap doesn't make me limited.
But I mean, we're not talking about that anyway.
But we're not talking about that. We're just talking about rock.
Because if you want to talk about iconic albums, those are the genres you want to talk about.
Yeah. Your dad asked about Crosby, Stills, Nash. You'll hear a couple of songs. It's usually I can't remember the name of that one really big song they had, but 94.7 plays like one or two of Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, and you know, Nash without Young and with Young.
Yes, Ian has an Android phone, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know where she's going.
It's
with
the
that.
newer Android phone. If you're asking about the plug,
it's got USB-C,
yeah.
which there's one like. Connected to my laptop, which we're using to record, which you can use that plug.
And I mean, I can route it to my car. I've got a backup in my car, but
it'll last another. The show's gonna be on like another 10 minutes.
We'll be fine. So, yeah, and when like I was saying, I mean,
but I want something new. I want new music,
but I want something new that can appeal generationally too. Because I am old. My sensibilities are older than these kids who are making music. They don't have to appeal to me, but if they're doing something right, it's going to appeal to me.
Yeah, you are in your 40s now.
I am 40. I'm not in my 40s. I'm 40.
That's you're in your 40s.
I'm 40. I am 40. It's not in my 40s.
Whatever.
I am 40.
Get all butthurt about it.
I'm butthurt. I'm butthurt. How dare you?
Little
damn
snowflake.
youngins. You damn youngins.
Shake your fist. Shake your fist, boy.
My grandfather used to do that all the time. He'd just go like this to me. He wouldn't say anything. He'd just go.
But yeah, I mean, like I said, there's some good music out there, and I've heard some good stuff. It's just when I'm going through, like I said, when I'm going through the rock playlist on Apple Music, and I'll say, oh, you know, it's a really good song, so I'll listen to the rest of the album, and I'm like, that's really the only good song off that album. And
right.
That's the kind of the problem that I think is.
And it could go to what you were saying about there's not a drive to put as much effort into a group of songs that's going to be part of an album.
Yeah.
And maybe that is it, but I don't know. I mean, maybe with this advent of vinyl, maybe that'll change. It's hard to say. I think I read an article, and they're estimating that vinyl is going to continue to grow. They're estimating it's going to double what it did last year as far as sales, and it's been growing ever for many years since.
And we've talked before about that also.
It's probably the saving grace of music, and that's not just rock music. That's everything. Yeah,
because you can go. I mean, every kind of genre of music. I mean, I've got rap on vinyl. I mean, you've got everything. I've got country on vinyl.
Right. Well, I don't have it. I'm not. I'm definitely arrogant about the music I listen to. There's no question there, and I'd be intellectually dishonest to say otherwise. But that doesn't necessarily, like I said, it doesn't necessarily limit me. There are thousands and thousands of songs I like, literally thousands. So, I just rock is we're talking about rock. There's subgenres of rock.
Well, that's what I'm talking about, and that's why I said I don't want to classify. I don't want to talk about rock and say, oh, well, you can't mention Green Day because they're kind of punk, so we don't want to include that. Or, I don't want to include Real Big Fish because they're ska. I mean, it's all rock. It all falls.
Yeah, it all falls under the umbrella of rock. Yeah, I mean, and you could even argue that the pop bands or pop groups, even the boy bands, could fall under that umbrella.
That's pop.
Well, pop rock, it's still...
But it's still... But pop is a separate genre.
But then you can't say that the Beatles' early stuff was rock, even though it was.
It was.
But it was pop.
But it was rock because that's what the rock sound was then.
Oh.
Backstreet Boys...
Were the Monkees rock?
Backstreet Boys didn't sound like Green Day.
Well,
that's what I'm saying.
But Green Day didn't sound like...
But you could
Poison.
But you could see similarities in the music.
I suppose. And
that's the thing, and that's kind of when you look at like the evolution of where rock has progressed, from its inception through the really the 80s, 70s and 80s, it always had the same kind of sound.
Right.
It sounded differently, but there was similarities in the music.
Yeah.
And then it kind of hit this grunge stage, and it was like very different kind of music, but it was still rock.
Right.
And then after that, it's kind of, what is it now? It just...
That's my point. And that's why I have a hard time kind of allowing what limited amount I've heard of, say, My Chemical Romance or Panic at the Disco to kind of seem like rock. I didn't see some of the similarities that I would expect.
Yeah.
Elvis was rock. Your mom pointed out in her day, Elvis, he was rock.
Yeah, he was one of the very first rock musicians.
I have a hard time calling him the king of rock because essentially it should have been Chuck Berry.
Chuck Berry was.
Because he was doing it before Elvis, and he was doing it better, arguably. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he was rock. I mean, that's what the 50s rock was, just because, what came after was much more of had a harder sound to it, a harder drive. I think that was even more indicative of the social elements, too. I mean, the 50s were very bright and cheerful, and Elvis kind of mirrored that in his music. It was, it was fun. It was upbeat. Once you got into the 60s, especially the late 60s with the Vietnam era and everything else, things got turned a bit darker. So things got heavier and angrier. And Sabbath was a perfect example of that. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were the angry rock band. They were the first metal band. If anyone, there wasn't a band harder than them, as far as just full force, like hard rock. So I don't know.
And yeah, the Beatles were rock. I mean,
I guess I'm not saying that it was pop. It was more bubblegum. The early stuff was more bubblegum.
That's what rock was.
But I guess, and then I started to point out. Then would you argue that the Monkees weren't rock because they were an invented band by the corporate entity? They were a pop band. They were what NSYNC and Menudo.
They were the rock version of a boy band. They were the rock version of a manufactured boy band.
Right, but they were like the first that was like that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, I like the Monkees anyway. I mean, what does that say? I love the Monkees. They're old. I haven't heard any of their new stuff. They put out an album a few years back.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't think
Right before Davy Jones died, it was called Just Us.
Oh,
Like
yeah,
Justice, Just Us.
Oh, yeah, I never heard it.
Yeah, I haven't listened to it either. I should go back and listen to it, but I'm sure it's on Spotify. But the old Monkey stuff is good for being manufactured rock.
Yeah,
I mean, they did let the artist write the music, but
no, they didn't. Neil Diamond wrote quite a bit of their
He
music.
wrote a lot of it, but Mickey Dolenz and
they did write some.
Peter York.
Yeah,
they wrote a lot of it too. So.
No, you're right. It wasn't bubblegum then. It was just rock.
Oh. Did that term bubblegum come out later then?
Because
I've always understood just some of that stuff to be kind of bubblegum, the lighthearted, soda shop kind of rock from the 50s and early 60s. I just kind of always assumed that's what it was called then. And maybe that's a term that's coined later.
Yeah, I don't know.
So
I don't know everything, so
I'd like to think I do, but I know I don't.
I didn't know you liked the Monkees, matey.
Everyone should like the Monkees. It's good stuff.
It is what it is.
It's good stuff.
But I don't know. I just want
Pleasant
something.
Valley Sunday is a good fucking song.
I want something different from the music released today. That's all it is.
Yeah,
and I don't know.
I think
I don't know if we're ever
going
to get anything. I want another, not grunge, but I want another era of, like, holy shit, what is this?
Right. In rock. Because we are, like you said, we are getting some of that in the hip-hop era.
You are.
In the genre. At least passionate stuff in that. I want the rock version of that.
Yeah.
And maybe with vinyl coming back, maybe some, 10-year-old kid's going to pick up a record, whatever it is. It could be Zeppelin, it could be Sabbath, it could be anything.
Yeah.
It could be Green Day. Pick it up and go, wow, what is this? And listen to it and go, that's what I want to do. And then they do their version of it, and it's,
And I guess that's another thing is without these big albums and these gigantic world-known bands, who's going to inspire the next generation of rock musicians?
Again, I mean, you can always go backwards. None of that's gone away. Just because we don't think rock is if we think rock is necessarily dead, but it's on life support, we'll say that. Doesn't mean that you can't go back and listen to all the great stuff that's been made before.
Yeah.
And who knows? Maybe a Panic at the Disco will inspire a kid to say, I like Panic at the Disco, and I like that. And then, what's this? And then say, well, what if they did this with that?
Yeah.
You never know. It could be something as simple as that. And then all of a sudden you've got this new thing.
Yeah.
It's just, I just like, up until the early 2000s, we were getting that thing every few years, and now we're not getting it at all.
Multiple times in 1 year.
Or even at least in a decade.
Yeah.
At least 2 or 3 times in a
decade.
decade.
Like I said earlier, just in 2003 alone, there was probably 6 gigantic records released that year.
Yeah. Like I said, Elephant was the only one I was familiar with that year.
I don't know. Did I actually read through?
You read a few. Yeah, you read all the big ones for 2003.
Because 2003 had Before and Everything After by MXPX. Like I said, Indestructible by Rancid. Meteora by Linkin Park. Blink-182's self-titled album came out that year.
I think why I kind of blocked those out is because none of those were from, aside from maybe Elephant, none of those were from bands that were brand new. Those were all bands that have been around for several years at that point.
Yeah.
We need the new stuff. We need young blood.
I don't care. I don't care who's releasing it,
as long as it's good.
I just want something really good released, regardless. I mean, the fucking Rolling Stones, for as overrated as they are, if they could create something awesome.
Well, their last album was all right.
But
me saying that is a huge praise because I'm not a huge Stones fan. But Black, I think it's called Black and Blue. It's a pretty good album for what it is. Extreme Christian Bluegrass.
Hey, and speaking of that, there are some really good Christian rock bands out there, but I mean, just they're not doing anything different. I mean, just it's kind of the same thing.
We can't go down this rabbit hole, Nick.
Well, still,
we just can't. There's a band at I've seen them. People have shared them on Facebook and stuff, but it's like bluegrass metal. It's metal played on all bluegrass instruments like banjos and like washboards. It's actually pretty cool. But I don't see a commercial viability for that.
Probably
but
not.
It's fun and cool to watch. I think you probably Google or YouTube metal bluegrass and it'll come up. They did a music video and everything. I'll show it to you after we get done doing the show.
Yeah, that's cool.
I'm sure it's copyrighted and
probably.
we don't want to get sued or whatever.
I don't need to get my hand slapped again by YouTube.
All right. Well, we're not on YouTube. We're on Facebook, but Facebook's getting pretty bad too.
But this audio will be on our YouTube channel.
Yeah. And
if you would like to check that out.
On a side note, I guess Facebook has banned Alex Jones for 2 months because of hateful things he said on Facebook. So I know you got. I as much as I fucking hate
freedom of speech.
Exactly.
Where's freedom of speech gone?
I hate Alex Jones, but you got to let him say his shit. You got to let him talk. Eventually, people will figure out how crazy he is if they haven't already. I know they haven't because people still love him, but. Eventually, he's going to say something. They're going to be like, "Wait a minute, that's pretty crazy." Yeah. You hope, anyway.
So I don't know. You got anything else you want to add to it before we end the show? I mean, we're kind of running a little long now, but
are we? Well, what is I don't know. What does our audience of 5 think? Or 3? I think it's 3.
We had more than that, but
did we?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I think we ran through all the kind of comments.
No, your dad said that, we had Ed Sullivan. That. I mean,
that's the thing. That was the MTV of its time.
It was, and I mean, the late shows still have bands on.
But a lot of people don't watch them anymore.
And yeah, I mean, do they? I don't. I stopped watching the late shows
because everything. I don't know. It seems like every time I turn on, it's just nothing but like Trump jokes and.
Well, they're easy.
I know, but it's just like I think that turns a lot of people off. So I think
probably
they're losing a lot of their audience.
That they and even if they're before. Not, I mean, even if you think back, did people really? I would stay tuned until the band played, and if it wasn't a band I wanted to hear, I'd turn it off.
Yeah.
Back in the day when I watched Conan or
I mean, I still DVR Saturday Night Live. And the only thing I watch are the
skits.
I don't know. The only thing I watch on there is the music performances.
Oh, really? I see. I would only watch the skits.
The skits are all kind of the same thing nowadays.
Yeah, I haven't watched it in a couple of years, but if I love sketch comedy, so my phone's just about dead.
All right, well, our show's about over anyway. I don't know. Anything else, Ian? You
good? I
hopefully something comes out. I want to see, like I said, I want something revolutionary to come out. And just kind of blow everyone away, but like I said, I just don't see. I just call me pessimistic, but I just don't see it happening.
I think it will, but it's going to be when it does come out. It won't be as big as what it was. It's the same thing happens with movies, and I mean, you look at the early '80s and all those huge, awesome, and inspirational films. When I say inspirational, I mean in terms of who it inspired.
Yeah.
The Star Wars, the Indiana Jones, the Back to the Futures, all those movies came out, and now we think we're recapturing that, but we're not. Even with Star Wars, it can't live up to itself, and I have a feeling that's what's going to happen. We'll get something. It'll be new. It'll be different. It'll be awesome, but it won't be quite as big as say Nevermind was, and it'll be short lived, and then we might have another Age of Darkness that we tell between the next one. So who's to say?
No, just real quick before we leave, I just want to thank everyone that tuned in and joined the conversation and, I don't know, gave us a bunch of shit, I guess.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Mandy
Mandy
poked the bear a little bit, but that's okay. I still love you.
I
still love you.
Well, as always, you can email us any questions or comments to contact@lifeingeneralpodcast.com. Come out and check out our website. lifeingeneralpodcast.com. It's got all of our previous episodes and stuff on there. I think there's some other stuff.
Oh, and real quick, your wife said, you forget who your children are. They will find the will in the way. So maybe.
Maybe. Because
they have, your kids have been exposed to a wide variety of eras of music.
Yeah, that's true.
So one of them could be the next whatever, or it's going to be their generation for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, so thanks guys. And that's about it.
Talk to y'all later. Rock
Peace.
on. Rock on. Always.
Something like that. Bye, guys.
Play my role, let me tell you about it. This shit right here, man, I'm about it. Only real niggas reside around me. Your old lady drop a guard around me. Dip like I know you can, bitch. Show me the ropes like we in the ring. Got you two cobras, you wanna hang. Shoulder to shoulder, them niggas basic. You know I won't lie. You know that I ain't for that fuck shit. You niggas alright, but I'm way better and she love it. Know that y'all sick as fuck. Here go this tissue, bruh. We taking the dub, hoping you get you some. This hit like a pick me up. She taking my drugs. Know they see the sign. That's some dollar sign. Know they sick as fuck. Know they sick as fuck. Tell them get well soon. Tell them get well soon. Know you sick as fuck. Get well soon.
Oh shit. Watch out, you the car, Billy. Oh shit. Right now, and I'm smiling in your face, bitch. With a gold smile, you should probably make placement to your eye. Niggas sick as fuck. Standing with niggas who down for that party. Who down for some bitches who showing their bodies. Swear to God, nigga.